Dr. Elena Vasquez pushed her chair back from the computer screen and rubbed her tired eyes. The numbers on the monitor looked the same as they had 3 hours ago. Static. Noise. Nothing but the endless hum of the universe talking to itself in radio waves that meant absolutely nothing to anyone. The Arecibo 2 facility was quiet at 3 in the morning. Most of the other researchers had gone home hours ago, leaving Elena alone with the massive radio telescope and her stubborn refusal to give up on what everyone else called a waste of time. She had been hunting for alien signals for 12 years. Now, 12 years of staring at screens full of random noise, hoping to find a pattern that would change everything. Her coffee had gone cold again. Elena picked up the mug and took a sip anyway, making a face at the bitter taste. She was about to call it a night when something caught her eye. A tiny blip in the data that looked different from the rest. It was so small she almost missed it. Elena leaned forward and adjusted the settings on her computer. The signal was buried deep in the cosmic background radiation, like a whisper in a thunderstorm. Most people would have ignored it completely. But Elena had learned to pay attention to the whispers. She ran the data through several filters trying to clean up the signal. Whatever it was incredibly weak, much weaker than anything they usually looked for. The signal kept cutting, in and out, like a radio station that was almost too far away to hear. "Come on," Elena muttered to herself, adjusting more settings. "What are you trying to tell me?" After another hour of work, she managed to isolate the signal from the background noise. What she found made her heart skip a beat. The signal had a pattern. It was not random noise from some distant star or galaxy. This was artificial. This was made by someone. Elena's hands shook as she saved the data to 3 different backup drives. She had been searching for this moment her entire career, but now that it was here, she felt terrified. What if she was wrong? What if it was just some new kind of interference from a satellite or a microwave oven in the town nearby? She called her supervisor, Dr. Martinez, even though it was 4 in the morning. "Elena, this better be important," Dr. Martinez said when he answered the phone. His voice was thick with sleep. "I found something," Elena said. "I think I found a signal." There was a long pause. "Elena, we've talked about this. You can't call me every time you think you see a pattern in the noise. Remember last month with the pulsar data?" "This is different," Elena insisted. "This is really different. The signal has structure. It's artificial. I'm sure of it." Dr. Martinez sighed. "Send me the data. I'll look at it in the morning." "But in the morning, Elena." The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone, frustrated. She understood why Dr. Martinez was tired of false alarms. The search for alien life was full of disappointments. Every year, someone thought they had found the real thing, only to discover it was just a new kind of natural phenomenon. But Elena knew this was different. The signal was too organized, too purposeful to be natural. She spent the rest of the night analyzing it from every angle she could think of. By the time the sun came up, she was more convinced than ever that she had found something extraordinary. Dr. Martinez arrived at the facility at 8 o'clock, looking skeptical. He was a tall man with gray hair and kind eyes that had seen, too, many false hopes over the years. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat down at Elena's workstation. "Show me what you've got," he said. Elena pulled up the cleaned signal on her computer. "Look at this pattern here," she said, pointing at the screen. "And here. This is not random. This is structured communication." Dr. Martinez studied the data for several minutes without saying anything. Elena watched his face carefully, trying to read his expression. Finally, he leaned back in his chair. "It's interesting," he admitted. "But it could still be interference, maybe from one of the new communication satellites." "I already checked that," Elena said quickly. "The signal is coming from deep space. The direction doesn't match any known satellites or space stations." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly. "What about pulsars? Some of them can create very regular signals that might look artificial." Elena had thought of that too. "I cross-referenced the direction with all known pulsars in that region. Nothing matches, and the signal pattern is too complex for a pulsar anyway." For the next 3 hours, Dr. Martinez tried to find a natural explanation for Elena's signal. He ran it through every test and filter he could think of. But no matter what he did, the signal remained stubbornly artificial. "I want to bring in Dr. Chen," Dr. Martinez said finally. "If this really is a communication signal, we need someone who understands languages." Dr. James Chen was a linguistics expert who had worked with SETI for 5 years. He specialized in trying to understand how alien languages might work. It was mostly theoretical work, since no one had ever found an actual alien language to study. Until now. Dr. Chen arrived that afternoon looking excited and nervous. He was a young man with thick glasses and an enthusiasm for impossible puzzles. Elena showed him the signal and explained how she had found it. "This is remarkable," Dr. Chen said after studying the data. "The pattern is definitely linguistic. See how it repeats certain sequences? Those could be words or concepts being emphasized." Elena felt a thrill of vindication. "So you think it's really a language?" "I think it's really communication," Dr. Chen said carefully. "Whether it's a language in the way we understand languages is another question, but someone or something is definitely trying to send a message." Over the next week, the 3 researchers worked together to analyze the signal more deeply. They discovered that it was not just one message, but many messages, layered on top of each other. The signals seemed to be coming in waves, sometimes strong, sometimes barely detectable. Dr. Chen made the first breakthrough in understanding the structure of the communication. "I think these are distress calls," he said one evening as they worked late in the lab. "Look at this pattern here. It repeats over and over, getting weaker each time. That's exactly what you would expect from an emergency beacon running out of power." Elena felt her excitement turn to worry. If they're distress calls, then whoever sent them might be in trouble. "More than that," Dr. Chen said grimly. "Based on how weak the signal is getting, I think they might be dying." Dr. Martinez looked up from his computer. "How long do you think the signals have been transmitting?" Dr. Chen did some quick calculations. "Based on the degradation pattern, I'd guess several hundred years, maybe longer." The room fell silent. Elena stared at the signal data on her screen, thinking about the implications. Somewhere in space, an alien civilization had been calling for help for centuries, and no one had heard them until now. "We need to tell someone about this," Elena said. "The government, other scientists, someone who can do something about it." Dr. Martinez nodded. "I'll contact the National Science Foundation and NASA. This is too big for just our facility to handle." But even as they made plans to share their discovery, Elena couldn't stop thinking about the aliens who had sent the signals. Were they still alive? Were they still waiting for someone to answer their calls for help? And if they were, what could anyone possibly do about it? The signal continued to fade as the days passed. Elena found herself staying at the facility longer and longer each day, monitoring the transmissions and trying to squeeze every bit of information from them that she could. She felt a strange sense of responsibility to the aliens who had sent the messages. They had been calling out into the darkness for so long, and she was the only person who had heard them. Late one night, as she sat alone in the lab listening to the static-filled signals, Elena made a promise to the unknown aliens, somewhere in the depths of space. "I hear you," she whispered to the radio telescope. "I don't know what I can do to help, but I hear you, and I'm not going to stop listening." The signal grew weaker, but Elena's determination grew stronger. She had found something that would change everything, even if she didn't yet understand what that change would look like. Somewhere in the universe, someone needed help, and for the first time in human history, humans knew about it. The question was, what were they going to do about it? Dr. James Chen had not slept properly in 3 weeks. His small apartment near the Arecibo 2 facility was now covered in papers, computer printouts, and whiteboards covered with strange symbols and mathematical equations. Empty coffee cups and takeout containers littered every surface. His friends had stopped calling, and his mother had left 6 worried voicemails. But James didn't care about any of that. He was on the verge of cracking an alien language, and nothing else in the world mattered. The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday. James was staring at a sequence of signals that had been repeating for days when he suddenly saw the pattern. It wasn't a random repetition. It was a mathematical progression. The aliens were counting. "Elena!" James shouted into his phone, not caring that he was probably waking her up. "I figured out their numbers." Elena arrived at the facility 20 minutes later, still wearing pajamas under her coat. Dr. Martinez showed up 10 minutes after that, looking annoyed but curious. "Show us," Elena said, settling down at the computer next to James. James pulled up the signal analysis on the main screen. "Look at this sequence here," he said, pointing to a series of repeated patterns. "At first, I thought it was just noise, but it's actually mathematics. They're using a base 8 counting system." He showed them how the patterns represented numbers, starting from 1 and going up to several thousand. Once he had cracked the number system, other parts of the signal began to make sense. "They're giving us coordinates," James said excitedly. "Look here. These numbers correspond to stellar coordinates. They're telling us where they are." Dr. Martinez leaned forward, studying the screen. "How far away?" James did some quick calculations. 847 light-years, in the direction of the constellation Lyra. Elena felt her heart sink. 847 light-years might as well have been 8 million. With current human technology, it would take over 1 million years to travel that distance. But James was already moving on to the next part of the signal. "There's more," he said. "Much more. They're not just sending coordinates, they're sending information about themselves." Over the next few days, James worked around the clock to decode more of the alien transmissions. What he discovered was both wonderful and heartbreaking. The aliens called themselves the Cathara. They were an ancient civilization that had existed for over 50,000 years. Their world had once been part of a great alliance of star-traveling species, but something had gone wrong. "Their star's dying," James explained to Elena and Dr. Martinez during one of their daily briefings. "Not just burning out slowly over millions of years. It's actually failing. Having some kind of stellar collapse that's happening much faster than it should." The signals told a story of desperate decline. The Cathara had been a spacefaring civilization, with colonies on dozens of worlds throughout their region of the galaxy. But when their home star began to fail, they had to evacuate all their other worlds to try to save their homeworld population. "They brought everyone home to try to find a solution," James continued. "But they couldn't fix their star. And now, they're trapped there as their whole solar system dies around them." Elena studied the translated messages on her computer screen. The Cathara had described their beautiful crystal cities, their art, their philosophy, their science. They were clearly a peaceful, highly advanced civilization, and they were slowly going extinct. "How long do they have?" Dr. Martinez asked. James hesitated. "Based on their descriptions of the stellar collapse, maybe a few months, maybe less." "And they've been sending these signals for centuries?" "Yes, but here's the strange part," James said, pulling up another section of the decoded messages. "These signals were never meant to reach across the galaxy. They were only meant to travel a few light years at most." Elena frowned. "Then who were they trying to reach?" "Their rescue ships," James said quietly. "They had a deep space fleet that was supposed to come back and evacuate everyone. But something happened to the fleet. The Cathara have been waiting for rescue ships that are never coming." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Cathara had been sending local distress calls for hundreds of years, not knowing that their rescue fleet was gone. They had never intended for their messages to reach other civilizations across the galaxy. "So these signals," Elena said slowly, "they're not meant for us at all." "No," James confirmed. "In fact, based on some of the cultural information they've transmitted, I don't think they even know other intelligent species exist. Their alliance was limited to a small group of local civilizations that all seem to have disappeared." Dr. Martinez rubbed his forehead, looking overwhelmed. "So we've intercepted what amounts to private communications from a dying civilization." James nodded. "And based on the signal degradation, I think their transmission equipment is failing too. These might be some of the last messages they ever send." Elena stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the massive radio telescope. "What about other species?" she asked. If we can hear these signals, surely other advanced civilizations can hear them too. That's what I thought, James said. So I started looking for any evidence that other species had responded to similar signals. What I found was disturbing. He pulled up a new section of analysis on his computer. The Cathera aren't the first civilization to send out these kind of death signals. I found evidence of at least 12 other similar transmissions from different parts of the galaxy over the past few thousand years. Evidence? Dr. Martinez asked. Fragmentary signals just like the Cathera messages, but from different locations and different time periods. All of them show the same pattern. A civilization in trouble, calling for help that never comes until the signals finally stop. Helena turned back from the window. Stop? You mean they die? James nodded grimly. All of the previous signals eventually fade out completely. The civilizations sending them just disappear. But if there are advanced species out there with faster-than-light travel, Helena said, why don't they help? I think they do know about the signals, James said, but I think they've made a decision not to respond to them. Dr. Martinez looked shocked. Why would they do that? James pulled up the last section of his analysis. Based on the frequency and distribution of these death signals, I think responding to them might be considered impractical. The distances are enormous. The time required would be huge, and by the time you could reach them, the dying civilization would probably be gone anyway. So they just ignore them, Helena said, feeling sick. It gets worse, James continued. I found references in the Cathera transmissions to something they call the Great Silence. They mention that their alliance used to receive signals from distant civilizations, but that those signals stopped coming decades ago. The galaxy went quiet, Dr. Martinez said, understanding. I think so. I think there's a whole community of advanced civilizations out there that have decided these distress calls are just background noise, something to be filtered out and ignored. Elena sat back down, trying to process everything James had discovered. So the Cathera are dying alone, calling for help from people who aren't coming, while other civilizations who could help them choose to ignore their calls. That's what it looks like, James said. The three scientists sat in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Elena spoke up. We can't ignore them, she said simply. Dr. Martinez looked at her with concern. Elena, there's nothing we can do. We don't have faster-than-light travel. We can barely get to Mars reliably. We have to try something, Elena insisted. We can't just sit here and listen to them die. James was already thinking ahead. Actually, there might be something we can do, he said slowly. I've been analyzing the technical information in their signals. The Cathera have detailed specifications for faster-than-light travel, if we could build a ship based on their designs. That's insane, Dr. Martinez said. We're talking about technology that's thousands of years ahead of us. But we have something the Cathera don't have anymore, Elena pointed out. Time. Their star is dying, but we're not in immediate danger. We could take the time to understand their technology. James was getting excited now. And we have something else they might not have. Human stubbornness. Every other civilization in the galaxy has decided that these rescue missions are impossible, but humans have a history of doing impossible things. Dr. Martinez stood up and paced around the room. Even if we could build a faster-than-light ship, which is a huge if, we'd still need to convince someone to actually launch a rescue mission. The government, the military, someone with the resources to build and crew an interstellar vessel. Then we convince them, Elena said. We take everything we've learned about the Cathera, and we make the case for why humans should be the first species to actually answer one of these distress calls. James was already working on his computer again. I need more time to translate. They're technical specifications. But if I'm right about their faster-than-light technology, it might actually be possible to build a rescue ship. Dr. Martinez stopped pacing and looked at both of them. You realize what you're proposing is completely unprecedented. No human has ever traveled more than a few billion miles from Earth. You're talking about launching a mission to another star system to rescue aliens that most people don't even believe exist. Elena smiled for the first time in weeks. I know. Isn't it wonderful? As the three scientists began planning the most ambitious rescue mission in human history, the signals from the Kythera continued to fade. But for the first time in centuries, someone was not just listening to their calls for help. Someone was preparing to answer. Admiral Okafor was quiet for a long time. Finally, she sat back down at her desk and activated her secure communication system. "Get me Dr. Yuki Tanaka from the Advanced Propulsion Lab," she said into her headset. "And Captain Maria Santos from the Deep Space Navigation Unit. Tell them it's urgent." Elena felt her heart start beating faster. "Does this mean? This means I'm going to have some very smart people tell me whether what you're proposing is completely impossible or just nearly impossible," Admiral Okafor said. "If Dr. Tanaka thinks we can modify the persistence for faster-than-light travel, and if Captain Santos thinks we can navigate to the Kythera system, then I'll consider making the recommendation." Over the next 2 weeks, the Space Command's best engineers and scientists worked around the clock to evaluate the Kythera technology. Dr. Tanaka, a brilliant propulsion engineer, became obsessed with the alien faster-than-light drive designs. "It's elegant," Dr. Tanaka explained during one of the daily briefings. "Much more elegant than our theoretical warp drive concepts. Instead of manipulating massive amounts of energy to bend space-time, they're essentially punching small holes through dimensional barriers." Captain Santos, a veteran of 3 deep space missions, was more skeptical. "The navigation challenges are enormous," she said. "We're talking about traveling to a completely unknown region of space with no way to correct course if something goes wrong." But as the days passed, even Captain Santos began to warm up to the mission. "It's crazy," she admitted to Admiral Okafor during a private meeting. "But it's the kind of crazy that makes me remember why I became an astronaut in the first place." The final decision came down to a meeting between Admiral Okafor and Secretary General Liu Wei, the head of the United Earth government. Elena and the other scientists were not invited to attend, but they waited nervously outside the conference room for 3 hours. When Admiral Okafor finally emerged, her expression was unreadable. "The Secretary General has authorized the mission," she announced. "We have 4 months to modify the persistence and prepare for launch." Elena felt like she might faint with relief. 4 months? Can we really do it that fast? Admiral Okafor smiled grimly. "Dr. Vasquez, you've convinced the United Earth government to risk our most advanced spacecraft on a rescue mission to another star system. 4 months is all the time we can spare before someone comes to their senses and cancels the whole thing." Dr. Chen looked worried. "What about the crew? You said we'd need volunteers." "That's already taken care of," Admiral Okafor said. "I put out a call for volunteers 2 days ago. Do you know how many applications I received?" "How many?" Elena asked. 1,200, Admiral Okafor said. "From every branch of the Space Command and half the civilian space agencies on Earth. It seems like everyone wants to be part of humanity's first interstellar rescue mission." Elena felt tears starting to form in her eyes. "They really want to help. Humans are funny that way," Admiral Okafor said. "Tell us something is impossible and we'll line up to prove you wrong. Tell us someone needs help and we'll risk everything to provide it." As the scientists left the Space Command headquarters that day, Elena looked up at the sky and thought about the Kythera, still sending their fading distress signals into the void. Soon, very soon, someone would be coming to answer those calls. The most reckless rescue mission in human history was about to begin. Captain Maria Santos had commanded 3 deep space missions in her 15-year career, but none of them had prepared her for the sight of the ESV Persistence's modified engine room, where once there had been conventional fusion drives and ion thrusters. Now there was something that looked like a cross between a particle accelerator and a crystal chandelier. "The dimensional drive is based on the Kythera specifications," Dr. Yuki Tanaka explained as she guided Captain Santos through the maze of exotic equipment. "But we've had to improvise quite a bit. Human manufacturing techniques are very different from theirs." Captain Santos studied the strange crystalline structures that formed the heart of the faster-than-light drive. "Will it work?" Dr. Tanaka hesitated. "The computer simulations are promising, but this is completely untested technology. We won't know for sure until we try to activate it." And if it doesn't work? Best case scenario, nothing happens and we're stuck in normal space. Worst case scenario? Dr. Tanaka trailed off. Worst case scenario? What? Captain Santos pressed. Worst case scenario, we tear a hole in space-time and destroy ourselves, our destination, and possibly everything in between. Captain Santos nodded calmly. She had known the risks when she volunteered for the mission. How long until we're ready? For departure? 2 weeks, Dr. Tanaka said. Maybe less if we skip some of the safety tests. We're not skipping safety tests, Captain Santos said firmly. A dead crew can't rescue anyone. But even as she said it, Captain Santos knew they were running out of time. The signals from the Cathara were getting weaker every day. Dr. Elena Vasquez spent most of her time now in the ship's communications bay, monitoring the alien transmissions and trying to extract every bit of information she could from the fading signals. They're describing massive solar flares, Elena reported during the daily briefing. The star is becoming increasingly unstable. They've had to evacuate their surface cities and move underground. Dr. James Chen looked up from his translation work. I'm getting reports of infrastructure failures too. Power grids going down, transportation systems breaking down. It sounds like their whole civilization is starting to collapse. Captain Santos felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Every day they spent in preparation was another day the Cathara moved closer to extinction. But rushing the mission would only guarantee failure. What's our crew status? She asked Lieutenant Commander Torres, her second in command. 18 volunteers selected from over 1,000 applicants, Torres replied. All experienced deep space personnel, all aware of the risks. Captain Santos had handpicked the crew herself. Each member had volunteered, knowing they might never return to Earth. They were engineers, scientists, medics, and pilots who had given up everything for the chance to save an alien civilization. What about supplies? Captain Santos asked. That's where things get interesting, Torres said with a grim smile. We can't carry enough food and water for a round trip that might take years. But Dr. Chen has been analyzing the Cathara's biological data. Dr. Chen nodded. They're silicon-based life forms, not carbon-based like us. They don't breathe oxygen and they don't eat the same kinds of food we do. But their signals include detailed information about their biology and their needs. Meaning? Captain Santos asked. Meaning we can't rescue them by bringing them back to Earth, Elena said. Earth's environment would be deadly to them. We need to find them a new homeworld that matches their biology. Captain Santos felt a new knot forming in her stomach. So we're not just planning a rescue mission. We're planning a colonization mission. Exactly, Dr. Chen said. We need to find them a world with the right atmospheric composition, the right gravity, the right stellar radiation. And we need to do it fast. Dr. Tanaka pulled up a star chart on the briefing room's main screen. The good news is that their home system isn't the only place in that region with suitable worlds. We've identified 17 possible planets within 50 light-years of their current location. 17 planets we've never seen, Captain Santos pointed out. In star systems we've never studied. True, Dr. Tanaka admitted, but the Cathara's astronomical data is incredibly detailed. They've been a spacefaring civilization for thousands of years. They know their local region of the galaxy better than we know our own solar system. Captain Santos studied the star chart, trying to wrap her mind around the scale of what they were attempting. They were planning to travel nearly 1,000 light-years from Earth, evacuate the survivors of an alien civilization, and relocate them to a new world. All using technology they barely understood, in a ship that had never been tested at faster-than-light speeds. What's our timeline? She asked. Elena looked at her computer tablet. Based on the rate of signal degradation, I estimate the Cathara have 2 to 3 months before their communication equipment fails completely. After that, we'll have no way to coordinate with them. And how long will it take us to reach their system? Dr. Tanaka did some quick calculations. If the dimensional drive works as designed, about 6 weeks. But that assumes no mechanical failures, no navigation errors, and no unforeseen problems. Captain Santos almost laughed. In her experience, deep space missions always had mechanical Failures, navigation errors, and unforeseen problems. Usually all three at the same time. What about after we arrive? She asked. How long to evacuate their population? Dr. Chen frowned. That's the big unknown. We don't know how many survivors there are, or how organized they are, or even if they'll trust us enough to accept rescue from an alien species. Elena had been thinking about this problem for weeks. I've been trying to establish communication with them through our signals. So far, there's been no response. Either they can't receive our transmissions or they don't recognize them as artificial, or they think we're just another alien species that's going to ignore them, Captain Santos said. The briefing room fell silent as everyone contemplated that possibility. The Kithara had been calling for help for centuries. From their perspective, the galaxy was full of species that could hear their distress calls but chose not to respond. Why should they trust humans to be any different? We'll deal with that problem when we get there, Captain Santos decided. Right now, our focus needs to be on making sure we actually arrive in one piece. Over the next 2 weeks, the crew of the Persistence worked 18-hour days to complete the final preparations. The ship's cargo bays were loaded with prefabricated shelters, atmospheric processors, and terraforming equipment. The medical bay was stocked with medicines and equipment that might be useful for treating silicon-based life forms. Most importantly, the ship's computers were loaded with detailed information about 17 different star systems that might offer the Kithara a new home. 3 days before departure, Elena received the last clear transmission from the Kithara. It was a cultural broadcast, containing what appeared to be their music, art, and poetry. Dr. Chen worked frantically to translate as much as he could. It's beautiful, he said, showing Elena and Captain Santos a translated poem about the light of distant stars. They're sending everything they want to be remembered, in case no one ever finds them. Elena felt tears on her cheeks. They're saying goodbye. Captain Santos put a hand on Elena's shoulder. Not if we have anything to say about it. On departure day, the Persistence sat on the launch pad like a silver arrow pointed at the stars. The ship was 400 meters long, built for deep space exploration and now modified for the most ambitious rescue mission in human history. Captain Santos stood on the bridge, looking out at Earth through the main view screen. In a few hours, they would activate the dimensional drive and disappear into the unknown. They might never see Earth again. All systems ready, Captain, Lieutenant Commander Torres reported. Communications with mission control established, Elena added from her station. Dimensional drive online and stable, Dr. Tanaka announced, from engineering. Captain Santos took a deep breath. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to attempt something that has never been done before. We're going to travel to another star system to rescue people we've never met, using technology we don't fully understand. The odds are against us. The distances are enormous, the risks are incalculable. She paused and looked around at her crew. Every face showed determination and resolve. But 847 light-years from here, there are people who need our help. They've been calling out for centuries and no one has answered. Today that changes. Today humanity answers the call. Captain Santos turned to Dr. Tanaka. Activate the dimensional drive. Dimensional drive activating in 10 seconds, Dr. Tanaka announced. Elena gripped her console as she felt the ship begin to vibrate. Through the communications array, she could still hear the faint signals from the Kithara, growing weaker with each passing moment. Hold on, she whispered to the distant aliens. We're coming. The Persistence vanished from Earth's solar system in a flash of impossible light, carrying 18 humans into the depths of space on humanity's first interstellar rescue mission. Behind them, Earth continued to receive the fading signals from a dying civilization. But for the first time in centuries, those signals were no longer being ignored. Someone was finally coming to help. The ESV Persistence dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kithara system, with all the grace of a brick hitting water. Warning alarms shrieked throughout the ship as the dimensional drive overloaded and shut down, leaving them stranded in normal space. Captain Maria Santos pulled herself off the bridge floor where the violent transition had thrown her. Damage report. Dimensional drive offline. Dr. Yuki Tanaka called out from engineering. We've got power fluctuations throughout the ship. And, Captain, she paused, checking her instruments. We're not where we're supposed to be. Lieutenant? Commander Torres worked frantically at his navigation station. We overshot the target by 2 billion kilometers. We're in the outer system, past the main planet. Captain Santos felt her heart sink. After 6 weeks of travel, they had finally reached the Kythera system, only to find themselves stranded in the wrong place with a broken faster-than-light drive. How long to reach the planet on conventional thrusters? She asked. At maximum. Burn 18 hours, Torres replied. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her communication station, her face pale. Captain, I'm picking up signals from the planet, but they're not the regular transmissions we've been monitoring. What kind of signals? Elena's voice was shaking. Emergency broadcasts. Massive solar flare activity. They're reporting that their star has begun final collapse. They estimate they have less than 72 hours before the star goes supernova. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. Captain Santos stared at the main view screen, which showed the Kythera star in the distance. Even from billions of kilometers away, she could see that something was wrong with it. The star was flickering and pulsing in ways that no stable star should. Can we reach them in time? Captain Santos asked. Torres ran the calculations again. If we push the engines beyond safety limits, maybe. But we'll only have a few hours to complete the evacuation before we need to leave. Dr. James Chen looked up from his translation station. Captain, I'm getting more detailed information from their emergency broadcasts. The population has been consolidated into underground shelters near their main cities. They estimate 12,000 survivors. 12,000, Captain Santos repeated. The Persistence could carry maybe 200 people in an emergency. Even if they made multiple trips, they couldn't possibly evacuate everyone in the time they had. Dr. Tanaka's voice came over the intercom from engineering. Captain, I've got an idea. The Kythera technology we use to build our dimensional drive. If we can interface with their systems directly, we might be able to boost our evacuation capacity. Explain, Captain Santos said. Their underground shelters probably have their own short-range transportation systems. If we can link our transporters with theirs, we might be able to beam large groups directly to our cargo holds. Elena shook her head. But we don't know if their technology is compatible with ours. And we've never attempted a direct interface with alien systems. Do we have any other choice? Captain Santos asked. No one on the bridge had an answer. Captain, Santos made the decision that would define the rest of the mission. All ahead full. Take us to the planet as fast as this ship will go. Dr. Tanaka, start working on the transporter interface. Dr. Chen, see if you can establish direct communication with the Kythera survivors. Dr. Vasquez, monitor their star and give me constant updates on how much time we have. The next 18 hours were the longest of Captain Santos's life. The Persistence raced through the Kythera system while her crew worked around the clock to prepare for the most complex evacuation in human history. Elena managed to establish communication with the Kythera just 6 hours before they reached the planet. The response she received changed everything. Captain, Elena called out, her voice filled with amazement. They're answering our signals. They know we're here. What are they saying? Elena's translation software was still working to decode the message, but the emotion behind it was clear even through the alien language. They're thanking us. They can't believe that someone actually heard their calls for help. Dr. Chen joined Elena at the communication station, working to improve the translation. They're asking who we are, where we came from. They want to know why we risked coming here when no one else would help them. Captain Santos thought about how to answer that question. How do you explain human nature to an alien species? How do you tell them that some things are worth doing simply because they're right? Tell them we're humans from Earth, Captain Santos said. Tell them we heard their calls and we came because no one should die alone. When Elena transmitted that message, the response from the planet was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of Kythera settlements began broadcasting at once, all sending the same basic message: gratitude, hope, and disbelief that rescue had finally come. But as the Persistence entered orbit around the dying world, the scope of the challenge became clear. The planet's surface was being bombarded by increasingly powerful solar flares. The Kythera's crystal cities lay in ruins, shattered by seismic activity as the planet's core destabilized in response to their star's collapse. "I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference from the solar flares," Elena reported. "Our transporters won't work reliably in this environment." Dr. Tanaka's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, I've made contact with their underground transportation network. Their technology is more advanced than I thought. If we can physically dock with their main shelter complex, we can establish a direct transfer connection." "How close do we need to get?" Captain Santos asked. "We need to land the ship on the surface right next to their main shelter entrance." Lieutenant Commander Torres looked up from his station in alarm. "Captain, the surface is being hit by solar radiation, levels that would be lethal to humans, and the seismic activity is getting worse." Captain Santos studied the data on her screen. Landing on the planet would be incredibly dangerous, but it might be their only chance to save the Kythera. "How long can our shields protect us on the surface?" "Maybe 6 hours, Torres estimated. After that, the radiation will overwhelm our systems. Then we have 6 hours to evacuate 12,000 people," Captain Santos said. "All hands, prepare for emergency surface landing." The Persistence descended through the chaos of the Kythera's dying world like a silver angel. The ship's shields flared constantly as they deflected debris and radiation, while the hull groaned under the stress of powerful gravity fluctuations. Captain Santos had never attempted a landing in conditions this extreme. The planet's surface was racked by constant earthquakes, and massive lightning storms created by the solar flares filled the sky with electric death. But somehow, impossibly, she managed to set the ship down just meters from the main Kythera shelter complex. "Docking tube extended," Dr. Tanaka reported. "I'm reading Kythera technology on the other side. Attempting interface now." Captain Santos watched the status displays as her crew worked to establish a connection with the alien shelter systems. Everything depended on whether human and Kythera technology could work together. "Connection established," Dr. Tanaka announced. "Their transportation network is linking with our cargo transporters. We can begin evacuation immediately." What followed was the most intense 6 hours in human history. The crew of the Persistence worked without rest, coordinating with Kythera technicians to evacuate thousands of crystal-based life forms from their dying world. Elena found herself serving as the primary translator, helping Kythera families understand what was happening as they were transported to safety aboard the human ship. The aliens were tall, graceful beings made of living crystal that reflected light in beautiful patterns. Despite their advanced technology, they were clearly terrified and overwhelmed by the collapse of their world. "They keep asking if this is real," Elena told Captain Santos during a brief break in the evacuation. "Some of them think they're dreaming. They've been waiting for rescue for so long they can't believe it's actually happening." Dr. Chen was working with Kythera archivists to preserve as much of their culture as possible. "They're giving us their entire digital library," he reported. "Art, music, science, history. Everything they want to survive, even if they don't." But as the hours passed, it became clear that they were running out of time faster than expected. The star's collapse was accelerating, and the planet was being torn apart by tidal forces. "Radiation levels approaching critical," Torres warned. "We need to leave in the next 30 minutes, or we won't be able to leave at all." Captain Santos looked at the evacuation numbers. They had saved 11,000 Kythera, but there were still 1,000 more in distant shelters that they couldn't reach in time. "We're not leaving anyone behind," Captain Santos declared. "Torres, prep the shuttles. We're going to make one last run." "Captain, the shuttles won't survive on the surface for more than a few minutes in these conditions," Torres protested. "Then, we make it quick," Captain Santos said. She turned to address her entire crew over the ship's intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. We have a chance to save 1,000 more people, but it's going to require everything we have. I need volunteers for a surface rescue mission that probably won't make it back." Every single member of the crew volunteered, In the end, they saved them all. Using a combination of shuttles, transporters, and pure human determination, the crew of the Persistence evacuated every single Kythera survivor from their dying world. The last shuttle docked just minutes before the planet's surface became completely uninhabitable. As the Persistence lifted off and raced away from the collapsing star, Captain Santos stood on the bridge and watched the destruction behind them. The Kythera's sun exploded in a supernova that lit up half the star system, destroying everything they had once called home. But in the ship's cargo holds, 12,000 Kythera survivors were alive and safe, beginning the journey to a new world that the crew had identified in a nearby star system. 6 months later, Captain Santos stood on the surface of New Kythera, watching the aliens build their first crystal city under the light of a new sun. The planet was perfect for them, with the right atmosphere, the right gravity, and a stable star that would burn for billions of years. Dr. Elena Vasquez approached her, carrying a translation device that the Kythera had built to help with communication. "The Kythera Council wants to thank you again," Elena said. "They're calling you the voice that answered, because you were the first to respond to their calls for help." Captain Santos smiled. "What I want to know is what happens now. Are they going to start answering distress calls from other dying civilizations?" Elena nodded. "That's exactly what they're planning. They've already detected signals from 3 other species in trouble, and they're not the only ones. Word is spreading throughout the galaxy about what humans did. Other species are starting to listen to the distress calls instead of ignoring them." Captain Santos looked up at the alien sky, where the lights of Kythera cities were beginning to twinkle in the distance. "So we started something." "We started everything," Elena corrected. "Before this mission, the galaxy was full of species that ignored each other's suffering. Now there's a network of civilizations dedicated to helping each other survive." Dr. James Chen joined them, along with Dr. Yuki Tanaka and several of the other crew members. They all looked tired but satisfied, like people who had accomplished something truly important. "I got a message from Earth today," Dr. Chen announced. "The Secretary General wants to know if we're ready for our next rescue mission." Captain Santos laughed. "How many distress calls are we receiving now?" 17, Elena said, "from all over the galaxy, and every one of them mentions that they heard about the humans who actually answer when someone calls for help." "Captain," Santos looked around at her crew, then up at the stars where somewhere other voices were calling out for help. "Well then," she said, "I guess we better get back to work." The rescue ship Persistence lifted off from New Kythera the next morning, carrying its crew toward another impossible mission to save another dying civilization. But this time, they weren't alone. 3 Kythera ships joined them, along with vessels from 2 other species that had heard about the humans who refused to let anyone die alone. For the first time in galactic history, the distress calls were being answered, and it had all started with a human scientist who refused to ignore a whisper in the void. The ESV Persistence dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Kythera system, with all the grace of a brick hitting water. Warning alarms shrieked throughout the ship as the dimensional drive overloaded and shut down, leaving them stranded in normal space. Captain Maria Santos pulled herself off the bridge floor where the violent transition had thrown her. "Damage report. Dimensional drive offline," Dr. Yuki Tanaka called out from engineering. "We've got power fluctuations throughout the ship. And, Captain," she paused, checking her instruments, "we're not where we're supposed to be. Lieutenant?" Commander Torres worked frantically at his navigation station. "We overshot the target by 2 billion kilometers. We're in the outer system, past the main planet." Captain Santos felt her heart sink. After 6 weeks of travel, they had finally reached the Kythera system, only to find themselves stranded in the wrong place with a broken faster-than-light drive. "How long to reach the planet on conventional thrusters?" she asked. "At maximum. Burn 18 hours, Torres replied. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her communication station, her face pale. "Captain, I'm picking up signals from the planet, but they're not the regular transmissions we've been monitoring." "What kind of signals?" Elena's voice was shaking. "Emergency broadcasts. Massive solar flare activity. They're reporting that they're Star has begun final collapse. They estimate they have less than 72 hours before the star goes supernova. The bridge fell silent, except for the hum of life support systems. Captain Santos stared at the main view screen, which showed the Kythera star in the distance. Even from billions of kilometers away, she could see that something was wrong with it. The star was flickering and pulsing in ways that no stable star should. "Can we reach them in time?" Captain Santos asked. Torres ran the calculations again. "If we push the engines beyond safety limits, maybe. But we'll only have a few hours to complete the evacuation before we need to leave." Dr. James Chen looked up from his translation station. "Captain, I'm getting more detailed information from their emergency broadcasts. The population has been consolidated into underground shelters near their main cities. They estimate 12,000 survivors." 12,000, Captain Santos repeated. "The Persistence could carry maybe 200 people in an emergency. Even if they made multiple trips, they couldn't possibly evacuate everyone in the time they had." Dr. Tanaka's voice came over the intercom from engineering. "Captain, I've got an idea. The Kythera technology we use to build our dimensional drive. If we can interface with their systems directly, we might be able to boost our evacuation capacity." "Explain," Captain Santos said. "Their underground shelters probably have their own short-range transportation systems. If we can link our transporters with theirs, we might be able to beam large groups directly to our cargo holds." Elena shook her head. "But we don't know if their technology is compatible with ours, and we've never attempted a direct interface with alien systems." "Do we have any other choice?" Captain Santos asked. No one on the bridge had an answer. "Captain," Santos made the decision that would define the rest of the mission. "All ahead full. Take us to the planet as fast as this ship will go. Dr. Tanaka, start working on the transporter interface. Dr. Chen, see if you can establish direct communication with the Kythera survivors. Dr. Vasquez, monitor their star and give me constant updates on how much time we have." The next 18 hours were the longest of Captain Santos's life. The Persistence raced through the Kythera system while her crew worked around the clock to prepare for the most complex evacuation in human history. Elena managed to establish communication with the Kythera just 6 hours before they reached the planet. The response she received changed everything. "Captain," Elena called out, her voice filled with amazement. "They're answering our signals. They know we're here." "What are they saying?" Elena's translation software was still working to decode the message, but the emotion behind it was clear even through the alien language. They're thanking us. They can't believe that someone actually heard their calls for help." Dr. Chen joined Elena at the communication station, working to improve the translation. "They're asking who we are, where we came from. They want to know why we risked coming here when no one else would help them." Captain Santos thought about how to answer that question. How do you explain human nature to an alien species? How do you tell them that some things are worth doing simply because they're right? "Tell them we're humans from Earth," Captain Santos said. "Tell them we heard their calls and we came because no one should die alone." When Elena transmitted that message, the response from the planet was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of Kythera settlements began broadcasting at once, all sending the same basic message: gratitude, hope, and disbelief that rescue had finally come. But as the Persistence entered orbit around the dying world, the scope of the challenge became clear. The planet's surface was being bombarded by increasingly powerful solar flares. The Kythera's crystal cities lay in ruins, shattered by seismic activity as the planet's core destabilized in response to their star's collapse. "I'm reading massive electromagnetic interference from the solar flares," Elena reported. "Our transporters won't work reliably in this environment." Dr. Tanaka's voice came over the intercom. "Captain, I've made contact with their underground transportation network. Their technology is more advanced than I thought. If we can physically dock with their main shelter complex, we can establish a direct transfer connection." "How close do we need to get?" Captain Santos asked. "We need to land the ship on the surface right next to their main shelter entrance." Lieutenant Commander Torres looked up from his station in alarm. "Captain, the surface is being hit by solar radiation. levels that would be lethal to humans, and the seismic activity is getting worse. Captain Santos studied the data on her screen. Landing on the planet would be incredibly dangerous, but it might be their only chance to save the Cathara. How long can our shields protect us on the surface? Maybe 6 hours, Torres estimated. After that, the radiation will overwhelm our systems. Then we have 6 hours to evacuate 12,000 people, Captain Santos said. All hands, prepare for emergency surface landing. The Persistence descended through the chaos of the Cathara's dying world like a silver angel. The ship's shields flared constantly as they deflected debris and radiation, while the hull groaned under the stress of powerful gravity fluctuations. Captain Santos had never attempted a landing in conditions this extreme. The planet's surface was racked by constant earthquakes, and massive lightning storms created by the solar flares filled the sky with electric death. But somehow, impossibly, she managed to set the ship down just meters from the main Cathara shelter complex. Docking tube extended, Dr. Tanaka reported. I'm reading Cathara technology on the other side. Attempting interface now. Captain Santos watched the status displays as her crew worked to establish a connection with the alien shelter systems. Everything depended on whether human and Cathara technology could work together. Connection established, Dr. Tanaka announced. Their transportation network is linking with our cargo transporters. We can begin evacuation immediately.